But the deepest changes were invisible. Where he had once approached problems with unlimited resources and armies of assistants, now he worked with whatever materials could be found or salvaged. Broken water pumps became opportunities to learn about gravity and flow rates. Failed electrical systems taught him about solar panels and battery storage. Every challenge required creativity, patience, and trust in solutions that emerged through prayer and persistence. The school roof leaks when it rains, Maria told him one morning, frustration clear in her voice. The children can't learn when they're sitting in puddles. Sean examined the building that served as the village school, built decades ago with good intentions but poor materials. It had been patched and repatched until the patches needed patches. In his former life, he would have hired contractors to demolish it and build something entirely new. Here that wasn't an option. What if we don't fix the roof? He suggested. What if we waterproof the ceiling instead? Working with Carlos and several other villagers, they spent a week applying a solution made from local clay, plant fibers, and a waterproofing compound they mixed themselves. The process was messy, labor-intensive, and required constant adjustments. But when the next rainstorm came, the children sat in classrooms that stayed completely dry. How did you know that would work? Father Miguel asked as they watched students concentrate on their lessons without the distraction of dripping water. I didn't, Sean admitted. I just trusted that God would provide the solution if we did the work. Word of their success spread to neighboring villages. Delegations arrived asking for help with their own problems, a medical clinic that had no electricity, a bridge washed out by seasonal floods, farming terraces damaged by erosion. Each project taught Sean something new about the relationship between faith and work. He learned that the best solutions weren't always the most technically sophisticated, but the ones that could be maintained and understood by the people who used them. He discovered that building something beautiful was as important as building something functional, because beauty gave people hope. Most importantly, he learned that his greatest skill wasn't his business acumen, but the ability to see possibilities where others saw only problems. You look at broken things differently than we do, observed Elena, the village grandmother who had become his unofficial advisor on community matters. When we see something broken, we see loss. When you see something broken, you see potential. Maybe that's what faith is, Sean replied, studying plans for a new water distribution system, seeing potential where others see impossibility. The work was physically demanding in ways his former life had never been. His back ached from hours spent bent over construction projects. His hands were permanently stained with dirt and cement. He fell into bed each night exhausted but strangely satisfied. But the deeper satisfaction came from something he had never experienced before: anonymity. In the village, he wasn't a music mogul or a celebrity entrepreneur or someone whose every move made headlines. He was simply Miguel's friend, the man who helped fix things and asked nothing in return. Children followed him around the village, chattering in Spanish that he was slowly learning to understand. They didn't know about his former empire or achievements. To them, he was just the tall, quiet man who always had tools in his pockets and seemed to know how to make broken things work again. One evening, as he sat reviewing sketches for a new community center, Father Miguel joined him with 2 cups of coffee. The villages are starting to call you something, the priest said with a gentle smile. What's that? El Constructor de Esperanza, the builder of hope. The title hit Sean harder than any award or recognition he had ever received. I'm just solving problems. Yes, Father Miguel agreed, but you're solving them with love, and when technical skill is combined with love, it becomes hope made visible. That night Sean wrote in the journal he had started keeping. What had begun as technical notes had evolved into something deeper, a record of his spiritual transformation written in the margins between water systems and school buildings and community projects. He was building more than infrastructure. He was building a new understanding of what it meant to use his gifts in service of something greater than himself. Each project was a prayer made concrete, each solution an act of worship. For the first time in his life, his work felt truly meaningful. The letter arrived on a morning when the mountain mist still clung to the coffee plants and the village was just beginning to stir. Father Miguel brought it to Sean while he was mixing concrete for the foundation of a new medical clinic, his hands already covered in gray dust. This came for you, the priest said, his expression troubled. Government courier, official seal. Sean wiped his hands before taking the envelope. Seeing his former name typed across official letterhead was like looking at a photograph of someone he used to know. For 6 months he had been simply the constructor or Miguel's friend. His old identity felt foreign now, like clothes that no longer fit. The letter was brief and formal. A federal grand jury was investigating financial irregularities and potential money laundering related to his business empire. He was required to appear for testimony in New York within 30 days. Failure to comply would result in an international warrant for his arrest. Bad news? Father Miguel asked, though the answer was written across Sean's face. They want me to go back. Will you? Sean stared at the letter, his mind racing. Around him the village continued its daily rhythm. Children walked to school on the path he had helped pave. Women filled water jugs from taps that flowed clean and steady. The sound of construction echoed from the medical clinic that would soon serve 3 neighboring communities. I don't know, he said honestly. That evening the village gathered for their weekly community meeting. When Sean explained the situation, the response was immediate and passionate. You can't go back, Carlos said firmly. They'll trap you there with their lawyers and bureaucrats. The medical clinic isn't finished, added Maria. People are depending on having proper health care before the rainy season brings disease. Elena stood with the authority that came from 8 decades of wisdom. Running from God is easy the first time, she said quietly, but a man who keeps running will find himself further from home with each step. The debate continued for hours. Some argued he should ignore the summons and remain hidden. Others insisted he had legal obligations that couldn't be avoided. But Elena's words echoed through the discussion like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. Finally, Father Miguel spoke. This decision must be yours alone. Whatever you choose, the village will support you. That night Sean climbed to the small chapel on the hill above the village. It was nothing more than 4 stone walls and a wooden cross, built by the community decades ago as a place for private prayer. He had come here many times over the past months, usually seeking guidance for engineering problems or community challenges. Tonight felt different. Tonight he was asking for something much harder to provide. He knelt before the simple altar and opened his heart to the God who had called him out of his former life. The same voice that had spoken to him in sleepless nights. The same presence that had led him through the mockery and humiliation to this place of peace. If I go back, I might never return here, he prayed aloud. If I stay, they'll never stop hunting me. What am I supposed to do? The answer didn't come in words but as a deep certainty that settled in his chest. He was being asked to trust not just in God's plan, but in God's ability to work through whatever circumstances emerged. Running had brought him here, but running again would teach him nothing about faith under pressure. The voice that had first called him to abandon everything whispered again, gentler this time but just as clear, trust me. By morning his decision was made. He would return to face the investigation, but not as the man who had fled in shame and anger. He would go back as someone who had learned the difference between the world's definition of success and God's definition of faithfulness. The village received his announcement with resignation mixed with pride. They understood that some callings required sacrifice, even when the sacrifice seemed to serve no purpose they could understand. How long will you be gone? Maria asked as families gathered to see him off. I don't know, Sean replied, but I promise you this, whatever happens there won't change what I've learned here, and if God wills it, I'll come back to finish what we started. As the bus pulled away from the village, Sean pressed his face to the window and watched his new home disappear behind the mountains. In his backpack were photos of every project they had completed together, sketches for the ones still under construction, and letters from the families who had become his truest friends. He was returning to face his accusers, but he was no longer the man they thought they were investigating. The mockery that had driven him away had led him to something more valuable than anything he had ever built or owned. Now it was time to find out if that transformation was strong enough to survive the world that had rejected him.